This is the Powered Up Podcast, show 175.
Welcome to a real-world education with insight and advice from teachers in the game, where current and former educators reveal what truly sets apart the great teachers and what it takes to make a positive impact on students. Whether you're in pre-service learning, new to the game, or a seasoned veteran, this is the show for you. You'll leave feeling inspired to take action because we are powering education by empowering you.
Hey, what's going on, everyone? This is Ken Ehrmann, host of the Powered Up Podcast, and I am here excited to bring you a powerful, inspiring, and very calming show. I had two fantastic guests with me tonight, two dear friends of mine, friendships that we've formed over the last 2 years, Suzanne Dailey and Rob Dunlop. And both of them I met together at a conference 2 years ago. Ironically, Suzanne teaches in a neighboring district of mine, but we just had never formally crossed paths. And Rob lives in Canada, so a great geographic distance away. But I brought the two of them on together because they both are fantastic educators. They both have experience as instructional coaches as well as in the classroom. And they both have spent a great deal of time and energy publishing books related around happiness, related around being happier as teachers and striving for that. And what I love about what they talk about and the messages that they bring when they write, when they record their podcasts, when they speak, and when they were with me tonight is it's not just be happy. It's real, authentic ways to strive to teach happier. It's real, authentic ways to look at our positions, look at our own responsibilities, and the actions that we can take in how to do our job better and to be better ourselves and to feel better about ourselves. And so we talk a lot about being a new teacher. We talk a lot about being experienced teachers, and we talk a lot about the foundations that we can set to be in a better place to do the best that we can and to feel good about who we are and how we're doing it, and to also be very realistic with ourselves in what we're doing on a daily basis. So I don't want to delay any further. I want to jump right into that fantastic conversation. So let's hear from the Teach Better Network and then jump into our conversation with Rob and Suzanne.
This podcast is a proud member of the Teach Better Podcast Network. Better today, better tomorrow, and the podcast to get you there. You can find out more at teachbetter.com/podcasts. Now let's get back to the episode.
Suzanne and Rob, welcome back to the Powered Up Podcast. I am super excited to have you both here with me. I feel like it's not a coincidence that we are recording this together pretty much almost exactly 2 years after we pretty much met and forged our friendship. I know the two of you already had a friendship before that when we met at a conference a couple of years ago. So welcome back to the podcast. For those of you that have not heard them on the show before, they were here with us before talking with each of them individually. So just to kick things off real quick, if you guys could each give just a brief introduction to who you are, what you do in education, what you also do outside of your school districts, and then we'll kind of jump in from here and have some fun talking teaching.
All right, Suzanne, you go first.
All right. Well, thanks for having us back.
Watch how fast she does it, Rob. Okay.
Yeah, I know.
Ready? Well, we're thrilled to be back here. So I'm Suzanne Dailey, and I'm an instructional coach for 15 elementary schools for a school district outside of Philadelphia. So that works out to be about 600 students I get to work with. And no, it doesn't. It's 600 teachers and it's 8,000 students. And so I'm boots on the ground, teaching every day, doing workshops, and just being a coach for grades K through 6. And then outside of school, I like to read, I like to write. I have a book called Teach Happier this School Year and a podcast called Teach Happier. So it's great to be back in this wonderful podcast with you, Ken, and with my good buddy, Rob.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, my name is Rob Dunlop. I'm from Canada, down near Niagara Falls, Ontario. And I just recently stepped back into the classroom. I'm teaching grade 7A right now. Last year, I had a crazy year. I was the consultant for technology in my district, as well as new teachers. And then in the last half of the year, I was actually double timing consultant with vice principal of one of the biggest, toughest schools within my district. So within the last year, I've been consultant, vice principal, and teacher. So it's been a lot coming back in the classroom, and I'm learning a lot every single day. Outside the classroom, similar to Suzanne, I love to present on happiness and education. I wrote a book called Strive for Happiness and Education. And I just love working with people and just kind of helping them create a mindset that they're going to kind of walk into work and enjoy themselves and love what they do and be the best for the kids that they're serving.
Absolutely. So, I won't try to translate too much for you for our American listeners, but when Rob says consultant, it's also known as like coach or, that support team there as well. And Rob, I didn't realize that you had transitioned into also doubling as a vice principal, because I don't know if you know that I spent the last half of last year being the acting elementary principal in one of our buildings.
Yeah, I didn't know that.
I was there from December through the last day of school, and I'm back now in my role as a coach as well. So I definitely want to talk about what you two are both passionate about and what you are very knowledgeable in with like you said, your podcast, Suzanne, and both of your books. And I think it's always an important topic, and my perspective has shifted a little bit more this year and how important it might be, maybe just in my district, but I think everywhere it goes up and down in waves. But I really want to kind of just check in on how your school years have started, especially with you, Rob, with transitioning back into the classroom after being out for so long. But Suzanne, I want to start with you. How is this year? You've kicked off many years as an experienced coach. So how is this year the same in that sense, and how has this year felt very different for you?
So this is my 23rd year teaching. So, and my 12th year coaching in this role. So there's been a lot of first days of school, right? And first
Mm.
seasons. I think this year, 2024, was the most normal back to school since the pandemic. And that just felt good. It just felt very routine. It felt as predictable as it was before the pandemic. And so I think that helped us start the school year already in a good trajectory. And it's just been a while since I believe we've had that. So that felt really, really good. And something that felt different this year is we are really trying to systematically not only support our brand new teachers, but also our year two teachers. And so I know I'm sure our conversation will scoot that way as we keep talking, but it's been a really interesting piece of the conversation to retain really good teachers
Mm-hmm.
and support them and love them in a different capacity, but a capacity that where they feel just as much support as they did in year one. So that's been a really exciting challenge. And I think that level of support will help keep people in classrooms.
That's great.
Yeah.
So Rob, you're back in the saddle where you haven't been in a while. So I kind of want you to answer the same question, but I also want you to take a little bit of a different frame. What were you going back into the classroom? What were you most nervous about or anxious about that ended up not being something that you needed to be nervous or anxious about? And what has been hard for you that you weren't anticipating being back in the classroom?
Yeah, great question, Ken. Yeah, going back in the classroom, I think the thing I was most nervous about, and I had the typical teacher dreams going in like the week before. What if the kids didn't listen? You get all like the paperwork on the students, and you read up on them, and you're wondering like, will they listen and respect me and do all this? And I'm very fortunate. I teach at the same school as my sister. She's actually my teaching partner, and so they kind of knew who I was coming in. So from day one, I felt respected. I felt that the kids are kind. They listen. They do what I need them to do. So that worry was kind of wasted energy. It's not that it's perfect, but it was better than the nightmares I was having for the week before school started.
Mm-hmm.
So that has been great. I think my greatest struggle, like coming back in the classroom after 12 years, is the resources, to be honest. Just being able to locate the right resource and the planning pieces has changed so much since I was in the classroom. Like when I used to be in the classroom, they had all sorts of resources that would just be in the classroom. We'd have like textbooks, or because it's when I think more online based, I find like I'm constantly searching and finding and piecing things together. And you know what I also find is I talk to a lot of other teachers that are still doing the kind of the same thing. So the planning has been a lot. But I understand that's, I knew going into this year, I knew that was going to be part of it. And I just need to get that base under me. I got to understand, because what I was doing was very specific, like to certain parts of the curriculum. Whereas now I think after year one, I'll have a really good understanding of the curriculum again, and how to effectively break it down. Like I'm constantly teaching lessons thinking, wow, I would have done that differently, or I would have reordered that. And so I make like notes for myself. And I think that will make next year a lot easier, just to have that base of resources and that base understanding of the curriculum. And then I'm really excited once I have that to kind of say, now I can augment and make things better and tweak it and really refine what I do. And, I think my sister said to me at one point, she says, I said, I don't know what's going on. Like my class seems kind of flat, and she just says, Rob, it's just a reflection of what you look like right now. She's like, she's like, you're stressed out. You're so worried about the lessons. You're so worried about the curriculum. You're so worried about piecing everything together perfectly that your personality isn't coming out. And I said, and then I remember saying, yeah, you're totally right. So the next day I went in and I just said, I'm just gonna be a bit more myself, like a bit more like friendly and laughing and crack some jokes. And all of a sudden my class came out and was a little different. So it's sometimes, we don't often reflect on what we're giving to our students and why we're getting certain things back. And that was a huge learning for me, is like, the curriculum and the lesson plannings are really important, but it's not the be all and end all of good teaching. There's other things, and the kids need you to be present and mindful of, wanting to be there with them.
Absolutely. And I had a question I want to ask you, but I wanted to piggyback off what you were just saying now. And Suzanne, I'm sure you've seen this countless times. The feelings, the energy that we're bringing to the classroom has probably the biggest impact on the energy of the kids in the classroom. If you're happy, they're happy. If you're angry, they're going to react in some sort of negative way. And that was something that I learned actually as a building leader as well. And I don't know if you felt that too, Rob. I for the most part, I'm usually very calm, even in situations where calmness is not easy. And I had teachers tell me over and over and over again, in a building that struggles to be calm because of the population of students that we have in that building, that there was a air of calmness across the building that they hadn't felt in a long time. And I couldn't put my finger on what it was. And I think it's kind of speaking to what you're saying of just the energy that we carry has such an output on others that we affect. And I'm sure one of you, more likely Suzanne, would be able to provide us some sort of scientific research or something that you've come across that would kind of compel with that. If you have anything to add there, Suzanne.
No, I mean, what do we tell students, right? You are responsible for the energy you bring into this classroom. And it all starts with the teacher, right? And so, as the adult in the room, as the person with the fully formed brain, we have to remember that. And it often takes us reminding ourselves very overtly that I'm responsible for the energy in this room. And it's a great privilege. It's a great opportunity. It's hard. It can be a great lift, cognitively and emotionally, but that's worth it, right? So who was it, Rob? Ken, you had somebody on the podcast that said the way you greet your students at the door is more important than anything on a lesson plan. And that is just, she had a delightful, like, British accent. I forget who she was.
I know you're
Her
talking
name
about.
escapes
I'm
me.
blanking
Yeah,
on her
she was
name.
lovely. But that's just true, And so I think it makes an incredible difference how an administrator greets you when you walk through the door, how teachers greet their students when they walk through the door. That is going to give such a positive feedback loop throughout the whole organization.
Mm-hmm. So, Rob, when you were reflecting on your first couple of days, you were talking about focusing on the resources and the content and looking and reflecting on lessons that you would do differently. And When I find this more when I'm consulting with other districts that I work with. Most recently, I was in a high school in a different part of the state working with their teachers on creating more targeted instruction in the classroom. And as a follow up to the PD day, I taught 4 blocks in a row. I taught a social studies, a science, a math, and an English class. And things went well and things didn't go well. And one of the things that I reminded the teachers of is the 2 greatest assets you have are your knowledge of your students, which walking in, I had very limited knowledge, and your knowledge of your content. And a lot of the concepts that I talk about, I developed when I taught 5th grade. And I say to them, if I transitioned and taught 2nd grade or I taught 8th grade math, I wouldn't do a lot of what I'm telling you here today until year 2. But I would get to where I was year 7 faster because I just need to wrap my head around what do students get and not get when you try to teach this stuff for the first time, and where are the holes and where are the gaps. And so you've spent the last 12 years working with teachers on their practice. Like, you have focused on instructional practices, and that's been your main focus, and curriculum as well. So how, now that you're back in the classroom, how hard is it to focus on that when you're planning lessons and when you're in the moment teaching? Like, how much energy do you actually think you need to dedicate to think about your instructional practice when it comes to implementing lessons day in and day out?
Yeah, it's tough because I think that the toughest thing is you have all this knowledge and you know all these things that you can do, but I don't have the time to execute it. Whereas in my coach or consultant role, whatever you guys call it, I had the time to like think and process and do all
Mm-hmm.
these things. You forget the 5,000 other things you're doing in a day, like calling parents and forms and this and that. It's like it's constantly like you're constantly your brain's going in a million different directions. Whereas when I had time, I could, if I was designing a unit or focusing in and doing some reading or whatever, I could really hone in on it. I find just at this point, I find because I'm dealing with so many things that are brand new to me that I'm not used to dealing with or understanding, that getting to that like higher level instruction, it's I'm trying to get there, but I think as I progress through and get more and more comfortable, I think all of that expertise will be able to come in and I'll be able to figure out how to use it. But just with like in like because I teach elementary, right? We teach a whole bunch of subjects, and there's a lot going on outside of the classroom, inside the classroom. So yeah, I find sometimes I feel like I'm not, and I think that I'm not meeting my potential. And I would say like one of the faults I made in the first month was that I was really hard on myself. I think I was really beating myself up at night if a lesson didn't go well or if I didn't set something up well. And you know, throughout it, I've been journaling like just some things about what I've been learning. And one of the big ones, just to give myself some grace, is like sometimes we go in there and we think, well, I'm 22 years in education, or I've been a consultant for 12 years, or like I wrote a book on this, like, and I think it's just about giving yourself grace and understanding that this is a challenging job, and
Mm-hmm.
for anyone to switch into any role, you just got to understand that it's going to take some time. I was talking to Suzanne a bit about like the power of optimism is insane. Like, because even when things aren't going well, I really feel like I'm optimistic that I know I'm going to get there, right? I just feel like if I didn't have that optimistic outlook of like, it's just going to take me some time and I will get back to like what I expect of myself. I think it would be really tough if I saw it being somewhere that was unachievable, or like I couldn't see that it was going to happen in the future. I totally think it's going to happen. I just think it's going to take some time. And then I think those skills are going to blossom in different ways that I'm not even aware of at this point.
So when do you think it's fair to expect a teacher? Because something that I believe is, one, like you said, teaching is an incredibly difficult position. It's very, very difficult. And I will never undervalue the effort that teachers put into their job because it's so much more than lessons. But I also believe that we are educated professionals. We typically at least have a bachelor's. Most of us have masters. We are professionals and we should treat ourselves as professionals, and we should have expectations as professionals. And we should be in constant pursuit of bettering ourselves as professionals. When do you think it is fair to expect a teacher, based on your experience right now, to be upping their game and implementing instructional practices that go beyond the basic lesson? I'll just use that as a basic definition.
Yeah, I think it's so different for everybody. Like, I think the class you get plays a huge role.
Hmm.
Like I have a really complex class, but I'm a really large guy. I've got a really big personality. Like it just I think there's so many variables to that. I don't think I think we should always strive for good instructional practice. I think right off the bat we should go in with that like I don't want to just settle for a basic lesson. I think it's just like we all come in at different starting points, especially like sometimes our new teachers maybe have done long terms or supply taught. They're coming in from because I was the consultant or the coach for all new teachers in our district. And what I noticed is they're coming in with all different levels of understanding and ability. So I think it's going to be totally different for every single person. And I do believe the students that are in front of you play a role in that. Because I like, for instance, like when I was teaching before, I was in a higher socioeconomic area, like 12 years ago. So when I went into this class with the same expectations of what my students were going to be able to achieve in say a 100-minute block, it was like a bit of an eye opener to be like, okay, we got to take a step back and slow it down a little. So I think it's always kind of going to be one of those things, but I think we should always be, jumping in and trying to learn, because it's those instructional practices which are going to help us with things like classroom management and getting the respect of parents and getting the respect of students. So it's something that we need to start developing as soon as possible. It's just be like, you know, there is an overwhelming piece in that first month where you're just trying to get your routines and everything in place and the relationships and learn. In our district, we really promote the idea of like the first month's about relationship building and understanding your students, right? But yeah, I don't know if that answered your question, Ken, but I think we should always be trying to do that.
Right.
I just think everyone's kind of at a different space emotionally and where they're ready to jump in at.
Yeah, it did. And Suzanne, I love your opinion on that as well. And even just a little bit of an extra focus from you on, are there instructional practices that you believe are really key in becoming a I don't want to say masterful teacher, but really important instructional practices, but you say to yourself, that can wait. That's not it. That's not a year one conversation. That's not a year two conversation.
Oh, sure. And so I know I had referenced earlier that we were working in a different capacity with year two teachers because year one, you're just surviving,
Hmm.
right? You've got all this unwavering optimism at the beginning of the year. And then there's like this moment of disillusionment where you're like, what am I doing? This is not what I thought this job was, right? And then you get sick and like physically sick because everyone gets sick this time of year,
Hmm.
right? And you're on this constant roller coaster. And so I don't think it would be fair to say, okay, now we're going to refine our practice. I think just kind of acknowledging that year one minimally is survival. You're
Hmm.
familiarizing yourself, like Rob was saying, with resources. And that comes in the terms of materials and people. It's just so much to navigate, whether you're a kindergarten teacher or you're teaching seniors in high school. There's just so much. It's so complex. And so that's why trying to help teachers survive year one when, at least in our district, and I think probably yours too, Ken, year one teachers are just observed so much and given so
Hmm.
much feedback. And oftentimes that feedback, it's just too much. They don't have the capacity for that. So we've been finding that when we've structured year two, and then when teachers are in year two, that doesn't just mean it's their second year teaching, it's their second year in our district. We start putting them in cohorts of, well, what was their prior experience? And what is, just what are their skill sets? What are their talents? What are their goal areas? And we group them accordingly. And then we get to target, we support them in a much more targeted way. And so, we pull them out of the classroom twice a year. And I think teachers need that sometimes. I think we have to get
Hmm.
out of our bubble. We have to get out of our space. We have to put ourselves back in the role of a student. And then that's when we can start refining our practice because simply we just don't have the capacity in year one. We're just surviving. And that's okay.
Hmm. Yeah, and there's and like you said earlier, Rob, 5,000 things that come with having a classroom. Secondary is different than elementary. They both come with 5,000 things. They're just different 5,000 things. And they do receive a lot of feedback, a lot, right? And especially if they have coaches in a district like the three of us work in, then it's not just administrators, but it's coaches as well. And I think it's so important to model as much as possible. And something I'm trying this year with focusing on new teachers for the first time as a coach is our new teachers, like the ones that are fresh out of college, they didn't teach somewhere else for 10 years. I'm spending 2 full days with them in the next couple of weeks where I'm kind of observing, shadowing, supporting kids. And then a day or two later, I'm going to lead the entire day. I'm going to run the entire day for them so that they can sit back and watch for a day. And I really, every teacher is going to be different, but I think the focus is not going to be, how to run small group instruction. It's going to be how to transition, how to greet kids, how to get them organized in a line and a positive, like little things like that, because there's so many little things that you have to pick up along the way that make everything else easier in the classroom.
Yeah, and you know what? That's what surprised me, I think, is like how many of those little things I forgot. Like
Mm-hmm.
it was like I used to be a master of classroom management, and like I had it just figured out. Like I felt like you could have given me any class 12 years ago when I was in that mode, and I just knew these little tricks all the time, and then now they're popping back into my head like post the moment, and I'm like I could have used that like a day ago. And so it just kind of comes back. And I just often think it's like with myself, it's like I have all these experiences that like to lean back on and to build confidence on. But I do reflect because as like you were saying in your district, like I was working with new teachers every day. We would actually have new teachers work with mentor teachers and go watch them teach for a day, and they would pick out all these things. But and so I do think to myself a lot, wow, like imagine what they're feeling versus
Mm-hmm.
what I was feeling, right? Like what like I like Suzanne, like yourself, I speak professionally, I get in front of huge audiences, so like those kind of fears don't even exist for me with regards to presenting and the technology and the computers and all. I have that down pat. But these young teachers coming in, I don't think I really truly understood like what their starting point was. And one thing I found when I would end up in my role last year would be called out to work with the ones that were really struggling. And I found what helped the best is just to say to them, not have my agenda, just to say to them, what are you struggling with the most? And they
Mm-hmm.
would say, oh, I had this kid. And I was like, oh, okay, I'll watch what's going on there. And then you'd be able to see, because you know I think when I started at the beginning of my consultant role, I always had an agenda of what I was going to go in and help people with. And what I really realized by the end of the consultancy role is that I needed to start asking questions and figuring out where they felt their struggle was, and then giving them how do you step forward from there. Because they know what they're struggling with. I know what I'm struggling with right now. It's just
Right.
I don't maybe know the next couple steps.
Yeah. And I would even argue to say that they don't know.
Yeah.
They don't know what they don't know, whereas you know what you don't know.
Yeah,
You know what
yeah,
I'm
maybe we're
saying?
different. Yeah, yeah, I
Because
get it. Yeah,
of your experience, right? You have so much to fall back on, and you can say like, that didn't go how I want it, but I need to do this and this, and it's going to be where I want it to be.
for
Whereas
sure.
for our
Yeah.
new teachers, it's just not there yet. And like we've all said, part of it is that's just part of teaching. Like that's
Yeah.
why hopefully you're in teaching for 35 years, because you get better, right? I can remember so many times having having a sibling of a former student, and that former student comes back at some point to visit, and they're saying like, oh, my brother was telling me you did this and this, like that sounds awesome. Like, yeah, sorry, your brother has a better teacher than you did. I mean, that's just the reality. And the younger brother that's in third grade is going to have an even better teacher. Like that's just the way it is.
For sure.
And it's hard to feel that and know that when you're in that new teacher role. And so um what have you had to, so aside from your content knowledge and experience, you also, like you both said in your introduction, have a deep passion for happiness keeping the teacher morale up through the work and the research and the writing that you both do. So 2 questions for you, Rob. And this is risky, asking you 2 questions at once.
I know. I was like, you're using all my chips up.
Is one, how much is Suzanne charging you per hour with her counseling to keep you teaching happier? And 2, what have you had to tap in the most in terms of your own, optimism and spirit in striving for happiness, how you would say with your book? Like what in your book do you feel like has been an anchor for you to survive and be at a positive state of mind at this point in the year?
Yeah. First question. Suzanne is one of the most generous people I've ever met, and does all of my counseling for free. She is. I don't want to embarrass you, Suzanne, but she is one of the most caring people. We're in a project right now, and I called her up and I said I was pretty overwhelmed with things, and she says, let's get priorities straight, Rob. Family, the job back burner, the project for a little bit, and then it actually, I think, will eventually enhance something we're working on. So she is incredible, and I love being a part of her team. And I think, and I kind of alluded to it earlier, but it is the idea of rational optimism, is that what I anchor everything on. And so rational optimism is basically the idea that we have a realistic assessment of what's actually going on, with the understanding that our behaviors will get us to a better space, eventually to the space that we want to be in. So one of the things is, even though on the toughest days, I still practice gratitude every day. I've been doing a gratitude journal. I think I'm like 2,085 days. I use this thing called positive reality, where like when something happens, I tend to, like, I think naturally sometimes gravitate to focusing on some of the negative things throughout the day. So I just take a deep breath and I just say to myself, what's the positive reality of this situation? And often it's not as bad as you may perceive it is. If you just tend to just look at the 3 or 4 things that went wrong, you're not looking at the 15 things that are going right, and the growth that's going on. So for me, it's pushing my ability to be even more optimistic. It's really easy to be optimistic when you're at the peak of what you're doing and you're comfortable and you've been doing it for so long and everything. But you get tested when you're put in deep waters, and you're in a situation where you don't actually know what's coming up the next day, or you're planning and you're constantly adjusting and pivoting. So yeah, I think just maintaining my optimism that I am, within a short period of time, I'm going to get better and better and better, and I'm going to be that teacher I once was, and like you say, if not even way better, because of all these other things I've been learning over the past several years, or the past like 20 years in education.
Suzanne, when you're working with new teachers, what are those anchors that you look to in supporting them, that, it's not necessarily a quote from your book, but that you've learned so much from the work that you've done?
Similar to what Rob was just saying, our brains are wired to keep us safe. So we have the natural tendency to see what's going wrong, or to anticipate something going wrong. And so what I try to help new teachers, and this is any colleague of mine, to not dress rehearse tragedy right off the jump, right? It's, how do we dress rehearse success? Okay, let's be a rational optimist, that, like Rob said, and let's acknowledge some of the constraints, the reality. Okay, but what's our next right thing? How can we use as much agency as we realistically have in a moment? And quite frankly, science is telling us we have far more agency than we ever believed, which is a really, really hopeful statistic. So practicing universal practices of happiness, like Rob said, gratitude, exercise, intentional acts of kindness, these are things that we can do to strengthen our relationships, increase trust with those that we work with and we live with. And then we just become a better version of ourselves when we feel that we are doing what we can. I said it at Penridge, Rob, right? To be, or Ken, I'm sorry, I'm looking at Rob, to be a part of your own rescue. Like, we get to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And there are days where we don't really need to rescue ourselves all that often, but most days we do. And so whether that's just trying to make a conscious effort to bend towards a more optimistic viewpoint, or whether that's a chance to have maybe an uncomfortable conversation that could eventually get us to a better place, that's all on us. And so I find it really exciting and really energizing to know that what science is telling us right now is we have a lot of agency in our own well being. And that's what Rob and I both mean by happiness. It doesn't mean tra la la, good vibes only. Like that's nonsensical. It's can you be steady in a really unsteady world? Can you feel as grounded as possible when the world beneath your feet is pretty shaky, right? I mean, that's what we're talking about. And some days when we teach, it's like, yes, this is why I'm here. This is the dream. Other days are not the dream, right? But we've got to show up every day and as realistically as possible, show up for the kids in front of us, the family we live with, the colleagues we teach with, the partner we are living life with. And that's a lot of work, so we have to give ourselves grace as we try and maximize that agency.
So you both use the term rational optimism, and I want to make sure that I'm understanding this correctly. So is that is that looking at a situation and possibly recognizing things that are maybe not going well or are not good and acknowledging that, but then also looking at the things that are going well and being optimistic about that versus just saying everything's fine, everything's good, like it's okay, we're going to move on, it's fine. Like is that kind of what you're saying, like
Yeah,
not being gaslit with optimism when it's not appropriate?
for sure. Is that whole idea of positive toxicity, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
like during the pandemic, that article came out and it was so bang on about like we can't just sit here and say like everything's great when it's not great. Like if you have like in my class, I had like 9 or 10 kids that are really struggling to read and write. It's like I can't ignore that. It's part of what it is. I have to recognize that, but it's the belief that through my own actions, I can keep moving that forward. It's really funny when and I don't know, Suzanne, if you agree with me, but like when you present to different districts on happiness and education, there's this very interesting vibe before you present it. They don't know you because they're like, oh, Mr. Happiness is here. And they think you're just going to blaze, sugarcoat everything. They think you're just going to make it seem so easy. And, I've heard Suzanne speak, and if you've ever heard me speak, it's all about being like, honest about it, and that it's tough. It's I did one earlier this week. I did a virtual talk earlier this week, and the intro, she did the bio, and then the bio she finished it with Rob Dunlop's going to help us be happy, and I had to correct her, and I'm like, I don't. I don't perceive as that we're ever going to attain happiness. I don't think you listen to one of us speak or you buy our books and you're happy. Does it work on being? Are you a little happier? Do you have strategies and skills and things that you're putting into your life that could potentially make you a little bit happier? And what's interesting is even being like someone who wrote a book on this or speak on it regularly. It's so interesting how you can um, forget things or misplace things that you actually know work. Like for instance, I just started working out again. I was like riddled with stress for the first like 5-6 weeks of school, and I was just sitting in my office planning lessons, making resources, and I stopped exercising, I stopped socializing, and I started, but then I started reflecting. I was like, these are all the things that make me a better teacher. So then now I'm exercising again. Now I'm going out with friends again. And you know what? When I get into my computer, I'm way more efficient. I'm way more effective when I get in the classroom. So even if we have the knowledge, sometimes we just need, just to have that self-reflection piece of, am I actually doing the things that are going to help me be a little happier or help me survive a tough year or whatever. I think that reflection piece is so important, just to take that step back often and say, what is it that I need to do to get to that better space?
Do you have
Yeah, I
anything you
love
want to add, Suzanne? Because I want to
Yeah,
ask a question
I
after that.
love thinking of a rational optimist, someone who celebrates the word and. So essentially, they can say, I'm in a really tough, heavy season right now, and I can discern my next right thing. I can be a part of my own rescue. Conversely, it could be like, I'm in a pretty good season right now. Things are going really well. And I can be a part of my own rescue. I can discern my next right thing. So it's really just harnessing that agency that we have. And so that could look when I say season, that's a very intentional word,
Mm-hmm.
because just about everything in our life is pretty temporary. So I like to remind folks, if you find yourself right now in a really good season, savor it because it's temporary. And if you're in a really tough season, recognize it's temporary, and so this could look really big, or sometimes it's just through the day, you have to remind yourself, okay, that was a good lesson. What's my next right thing? That was a pretty
Mhm.
good
Sure.
day. What's my next right thing? And that just helps us as a parent and a partner, all the roles that we play, both in our classroom and outside of it as well.
So, I was working with a teacher who felt like they were not getting rational optimism when they were voicing concerns and struggles. They
Mhm.
felt like they were getting gaslit with optimism,
Mhm.
where optimism was just being blanketed over the problems and the things that the teacher is advocating for and showcasing concerns for and not getting solutions. So when you're in a situation where you're looking for rational optimism, especially maybe from leadership, and you're not getting that, what are some strategies that you can do to get that, or to help the person that's giving you unrational or irrational optimism? Like what are some ways to navigate situations like that?
I mean, one natural way is it's a strengths based conversation, right? So you've heard me say, both of you have heard me say this, right? Tell me something good. Like that's how we're going to start. And they're like, oh, tell you something good. And they kind of look at you weird, but then they come up with something, right? Or, Rob, you had mentioned earlier, sometimes you ask a teacher, well, what's really tough right now? You could flip it and say, tell me, when do you feel your best during the school day? Like, is it a subject? Is it a time of day? Where do you just feel good? And then try and think about, why is that? What is it? The time of day? Is it the subject? Is it, um, I mean, it could be 100,000 things, right?
Mm-hmm.
Trying to extract what that is and bringing it into the conversation. And again, as an instructional coach, as a friend, as a colleague, we don't want to be the advice monster,
Mm-hmm.
right? We need to look at our pie chart of our conversation as like 80-20. 80% of the time, they should be talking, they could be venting, they could be saying all the things, right? And through our rephrasing, through our questioning, do I have that right? It sounds like you're really frustrated because you're not getting the support for this student in math. They're like, no, 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 that's not actually what I meant. I meant that I don't have, I don't have support for him when fill in the blank. So it kind of gives a sense of validation. Oftentimes people want to be validated. They want to be heard. They want to hear from somebody else. That sounds really hard,
Mm-hmm.
because it is. We can't just, oh, you know what we can do? Let's try this strategy, or let's try this nonverbal cue. Just, yeah, this must be really hard every single day, right? Like Rob and I Vox, like that's kind of how we have our therapy sessions. And there's been times, right, Rob, I'm like, dude, this is awful, right?
Yeah.
People just need to hear that because our jobs are really hard. I don't know, Rob, what do you think?
And I think sometimes like you can't always look to other people, specifically leadership, to give you what you need, right? Like
Mhm.
I had a situation a couple weeks ago, it was like last week, and I ended up calling one of my best friends, and we had this amazing conversation where I was just open and honest about some of the things I was struggling with and how I was feeling, and he was just the right guy that led me through there. Like sometimes leaders aren't equipped with the ability. I think when I think of rational optimism, I don't think of what I'm looking for rational optimism in other people. I think of the rational optimism that I feel within myself.
Mm-hmm.
It's how I'm looking forward. So I can't control what it is. There's this study by Sonia Limbrowski where she talks about that we have 40% of control over our happiness, right? So for me, it's like I have to internally focus on that. And if someone's unable to set that up or to give that to me, and often, especially if you're a new teacher, like you don't have the ability to help change your leadership. Like you just got to work around that. But I'll tell you something, in every building there's people that really can support you, and you got to find those positive people, or
Mhm.
if they're not there, you got to find them, whether it be online or whether it be within your district, or search out those people and find those people that will help you get to that state of rational optimism, and that belief that everything's going to be okay. I think too often we look to certain people in leadership roles to help us get through certain things, but they have different priorities, they have different focuses, they have different challenges. Like Ken, you must have seen it. Like
Mm-hmm.
I'll tell you a very funny story. When I started being VP, I made this 8 by 8.5 by 11 sheet, and had all these words that I wanted to do every day. Like I wanted to make sure I connected with every teacher. Da, da, da. Man, I got in there. I don't even think I looked at that sheet for 3 months. Like I had it pinned up. I don't even know if I read it once. And so like that job comes with its own thing. So you can't often, it's amazing if you got that person that could really inspire you to work towards that. But if they're not there, then you need to look to find other people or look within yourselves and just do some work on yourself. I think that is so key.
So I'm currently reading the book The One Thing. Have either of you ever read that? It's a good
No.
book.
Tell us about it.
It's pretty much about how you have to focus your energy on the one thing. So if you want to be, let's just say, a better teacher, what is the one thing that you should do to focus on to improve your practice as a teacher? Like that's what you should focus all of your energy on. And I'm not finished the book yet, but it talks about work-life balance and how you can't actually have balance. It's about setting parameters and priorities and that type of thing. And Suzanne, when you were talking about seasons, you have good seasons and you have bad seasons. And I think it's really important to work on those balances or those parameters of when do you work, when are you with family, when are you with your kids if you have kids, when are you with your partner, when are you with your friends, when are you with yourself, what are things you want to do for yourself. And I think it's easier to develop in those good seasons. And Rob, I'm kind of curious with you going back in the classroom where you're at now with that, and even in your role as VP, that was something that I really worked on extremely hard for pretty much when I started in coaching. And so when I was moved really abruptly into running the building for the last 6 months of the year, keeping my balance as a father and a husband wasn't bad at all. I actually didn't struggle with it too much, right? Like I was coming home more stressed than I was as a coach because I was dealing with much more intense situations and much more emotionally drained when I came home versus coaching. But I felt like after the dust settled, I was able to kind of fall back into, I don't look at my email when I get home. I don't look at my email till, after my kids went to bed, because I was finding that I was checking email after dinner, and I was at least one day a week getting an email that was not great, and it was ruining my night. And then I wasn't emotionally present with my kids. But so anyway, what I'm saying is, because I had a foundation in a good season, when that bad season hit, I was able to really kind of fall to that foundation rather quickly. So how has that, because I'm sure you're working much more now than you were when you were consulting. So kind of how has that been how have you navigated that, being back in the classroom and maintaining that balance, kind of like you talked about with exercising again?
Yeah, total struggle. Starting like total struggle. The first month, zero balance. I don't even know if my kids knew where I was. I was stuck in an office. My wife's like, "How are you working so much?" Like even on the weekends, I was working like 10 hours a day, and I had all these other previous commitments that I had. So it just I didn't know how to navigate it, and it just felt like, and I think when you're in that mode and you're panicking and you're not settled and there's all your thoughts aren't really lining up, so you're not that efficient at what you're doing. And then the more I start to peel away and make time for myself or make time for my family, like today we went out and watched my son play volleyball, then went to a football game with my daughter. Like it just, when you get down to work, you're more present in the work you're doing, you're more focused, you're more, and then you're not just ruminating on things. You're like, I got to get this done. So I agree with you though. Like as a vice principal, I had way better life balance. Even though I was getting home later and I was more stressed, being a first year teacher, it's like I know every day that I have to walk in and deliver X amount of like minutes of engaging content to these students, and so there is a lot of pressure. But the thing I've learned is that the more I do it, the more efficient I get at it, the better I get at it, the more time I save. And now I've started actually being like, okay, now I've got to really start making myself a priority again and my family a priority again. But I did lose 100% balanced in the first month for sure. But I do see that I can do it in a different way. I just, and then and at the beginning, my sister who I work with was really trying to support me, and I was kind of trying to like do it on my own. I have a certain way I like to do things, and I just realized that maybe I just got to start leaning on people a little bit more, and not just try and be the hero and do everything at like this level that I've been accustomed to doing it at. And because I do have great kids, and I do have an amazing wife, and I do have a lot of great friends. So it's getting back there. But I think anytime you enter into like, I would describe the season was in hurricane season for the first month. So you're just hanging on, and like Suzanne said, you're just surviving. And but the thing is, Ken, I expected that. I didn't expect to go in and just walk through the first year of teaching. I expected that first month to be challenging, and which it was. And I expect by the end of the school year, I'll be a lot more confident, and I'll have that really great life balance back.
Mm-hmm. What are those anchors that you lean on, Suzanne, when you're not in the spring blooming seasons?
Yeah, you get granular, right? And you have to think so small. A strategy that I love is, at like the beginning of the year, people like choose a word, like this year's going to be joy. But like January, Suzanne doesn't know what October Suzanne needs, right? So a really grounding practice that I try to do just about every day is I just pick a word at the beginning of the day. And I'll tell you, the last few weeks, October's really, really busy, just in my job and with my family. Like it's just, there's 1,000 things going on every day. So sometimes what I do is I pick the word and it's, how do I want to feel when I go to bed at night? And so, like this today, it was, I just want to feel calm, right? I want to feel peaceful. Where, like, if I'm rocking and rolling, I'm like, I want to feel accomplished. I want to feel proud. Well, not right now. Today's the day I just want to feel calm. And so I think if we just, again, give ourselves some grace, just check in with ourselves. What's your day? What do you perceive the day is going to be like? What do you think you're going to need? And what's that grounding word that could kind of center you through the day? Um, some days I want to feel like I was present with my people, right? And whether that's at school or home. And when I do that, it just changes the way I move through my day. I'm much more present. I'm much more anchored. I'm much more patient because it's just kind of giving me something to tether me on in those really crazy, challenging seasons.
And just to add on to that, something that has helped me in the past is attaching like a physical object to that. I
Mm,
like currently, like when I was really struggling, I reached out and I found this bracelet that I like to wear. And the bracelet for me is a reminder of what I'm trying to achieve. If it's whether it be like work life balance or whether it be like more present, like so I almost attach an idea to like an object. And I have this little smooth stone that I carry in my pocket sometimes, and I find that every time I put my hand in my pocket, I'm like, oh yeah, be okay, just be more mindful, be more in the moment. Don't get you like ahead of yourself. I would say one of the things I've done the worst in the first month was I was so far ahead of everything in my thoughts. I wasn't dealing with like tomorrow. I was dealing with what about report cards? How am I going to do this? How am I going to do this? And I was 6, 7 weeks down the line worrying about things that weren't even in front of me that wouldn't even, I don't even know if they would be issues. So for me, like putting the bracelet back on and having that stone, it just reminded me to like, it's not just the fact I'm wearing it, it's the fact I have an idea attached to it. So I think by doing that little physical piece can help certain people, I think, just to keep a reminder on what their goal is for that day or for that week or
mhm.
whatever it is.
Yeah, I think that's so important. And Suzanne, I have a feeling you forgot you were recording us tonight when you said you wanted to go to bed calm. But I had a teacher in maybe the second week of school mention about being nervous about conferences, and I said, okay, I'm gonna send you an email invite now for November, and we're gonna talk about that in November because
Mhm.
that's a November thing. Like we don't need to
Yeah.
worry about that in the second week of
Yeah.
school. So I kind of want to wrap up this conversation here with a question that I ask once in a while that I think is fitting for our conversation tonight. what is your best advice? So Rob, this can be advice for yourself if you want it to be. And
Yeah.
Suzanne, this connects with what you're doing this year, in particular with your teachers. What do you think is really good advice for year 2 teachers? Because like you said, Suzanne, year 1 is surviving. So advice is how to survive, right? Year 2 is where we start to develop something. So what is advice you would give to a year 2 teacher, whether they're year 2 brand new or they're year 2 in Rob's situation, coming back to the classroom, or year 2, I've taught 5th grade for 12 years and now I'm teaching 2nd grade, right? The first year of that is surviving 2nd grade, and then I'm ready in year 2. So what's that advice you would give?
I think for me, it's just about like continuing to give yourself grace and understanding that you're still at the beginning of your career. Like there's still a long road of learning to kind of ahead of you. So understand that it's fine, and just remember that you're not expected to kind of have this down after 1 year. You're gonna have multiple opportunities to actually try this. I think for me, it's the thing I'm going to go in with in the second year is a really reflective piece over trying to look back in my previous, and that's why I'm trying to document some of what I'm doing, because I want to be able to have it in my mind to say, okay, I remember how that went last year. How can I make those little shifts? And it's not huge shifts. Like it's not like you have to make these monumental shifts in your teaching practice, like going from like only doing sheets to doing like massive inquiry based projects and scaffolded learning and all. Like it's just like what is the next logical step in bringing, and sometimes I don't know if you know that until you know your kids. Like sometimes
Mm-hmm.
I don't really, I think you could sit here and theorize about like what that would be. Like, sometimes you think, well, I could write a book and it could be first year, second year, third year, but the experiences that everyone is having is so dramatically different. You could have a really challenging class in year 2 that you didn't have in year 1, and then you feel like you took a step back somewhere, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
but I do think it's like continue to give yourself grace. Make those small shifts by looking and reflecting on what you did the year past, and see how can you just take that 1 or 2 step forward that's going to make you just better for the kids in front of you.
Yeah, I would agree, Robin. Year one, it's everything. It's everything always.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
year two, it's what are we paying attention to this year? It could be
Hmm.
anything as I want to strengthen core instruction in this subject area.
Yeah,
Great. Or it could be something of, I want to get better feedback. I want to establish a stronger connection between school and home. It's just focusing in and paying attention to that one thing throughout the year. That's how growth happens. That's how permanent positive change occurs in our practice. We can't focus on everything. We have to really zoom in on just a few things. So that's what we invite our year two teachers to do is we pick a goal in the fall, we do a coaching cycle, we pick another goal in the spring, we do a coaching cycle, and just try and help them with that goal and what they want to strengthen. Because to your point, Rob, everybody is coming from such a different background and they're serving such different students in front of them.
yeah, and that's perfect. I
Yeah.
think you're right. Is like not overwhelm yourself. Like I do agree. Like pick one area that you reflected
Mhm.
on and said that's an area that I really could use some improvement on, or I really feel like maybe I need to build some confidence in that area, and just make that. And then at least you have that base sitting there that allows you to kind of hone your energy in a different area because you have some experience in the other area. Every year you teach, you find you have more and more like capacity and more brain space to kind of do other things and bump it up to the next level. It just can be at the beginning. You don't actually know that because you haven't went through that series. But yeah, I think she's so right. Just have a very specific focus, and especially access supports too is huge. Like if you have access to coaches and people who have been doing it a long time, that's a game changer for a lot of teachers if they have that.
Definitely. I want to thank you both for coming on here. I'm so appreciative not only of your knowledge, your experience, but just your friendship as well. It's been such a pleasure getting to know the both of you over the past couple of years, and I'm very grateful for the support you've given me in different areas and capacities, and just your time here and the advice you're giving the teachers. I think it's so valuable and so important, and you two are without a doubt very positive lights in education, and I encourage everyone to follow you guys. I've seen both of you speak in different capacities, and I would highly encourage anyone to look into to bring you out to their district. So to wrap things up, please just let our audience know what the title of your book is again. We'll link up to all that in the show notes and just how they can communicate and stay in touch with you.
Go ahead, Rob.
Okay. Yeah. So my book, Strive for Happiness in Education. My social media handle is Rob Dunlop EDU. I have a website called motivatedyou.com. It's like motivated with a U, just the letter U.com. And there's all sorts of kind of positive videos and in things, in books, all sorts of things that you can kind of check out. And there's a free staff wellness plan if you just need a video to kind of send to yourself. I've been working on that for a couple of years. So yeah, feel free to reach out at any point.
And my book is called Teach Happier This School Year. A weekly podcast is called Teach Happier. You can find everything over at SuzanneDailey.com. So thanks for letting us share that, Ken.
Absolutely. Thank you both so much. Thank you to our listeners. And I look forward to connecting with everyone again for our next podcast. Have a great night.
All right. Have a great night, Ken. You're the best, buddy.
Thanks. Thank you so much for listening to this podcast. If you haven't already, please subscribe on whichever platform you're listening to or watching us on YouTube. Each week, we get to talk to amazing educators who are making a positive impact on the lives of students, their colleagues, administrators, and education as a whole. It's been such a privilege every week to be able to talk to these incredible individuals, learn from them, grow with them, and better myself and all of education through these conversations. If you haven't already, please consider sharing this with a colleague, someone who can benefit and be powered up from the experience of listening to these incredible conversations. Because of Powered Up, we are powering education by empowering you.